I've never seen levels like this in a child who appears so healthy, the doctor murmured, his finger pressing along a line of numbers. His other hand rested on the phone, already beginning the call that would break the rhythm of an ordinary day. The mother held her daughter closer, sensing the room shift beneath her feet. Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from. The truth behind that single sheet of paper raised one urgent question. What did he see that made 911 the only option? To understand, we have to return to where the day began, back in the kitchen, before any of this seemed possible. The morning light filtered into the kitchen in thin gold bands across the counter. She slipped a small bag of apple slices into her daughter's lunchbox, the familiar snack she always packed for doctor visits. At her side, the girl chattered brightly about friends at school and the book she still needed to finish. Her cheeks were pink, her movements quick and restless. "Do you think my teacher will like my drawing?" she asked, holding up a folded paper before tucking it into her backpack. The visit itself felt ordinary before it even began. It had been penciled on the calendar weeks ago, a yearly checkup, the kind every child expects. Routine, predictable. Nothing more than weight, height, and a simple question or two. In the waiting room, other families sat with their children. Blocks clacked on the carpet nearby in steady rhythm. Pages of picture books turned with quiet shuffles. The air carried the sharp tang of sanitizer, mixed with the cozy scent of worn carpet. When the nurse called her name, her voice had the warmth of recognition. A brief smile, a soft comment about how much the child had grown since last year. The exam room walls pressed close in their pale blankness, while the girl climbed onto the paper-covered table. The paper crackled beneath her, each shift of her legs sending small ripples through the silence. She traced lines and circles with her fingertip, humming as if the room belonged to her. The doctor entered with calm ease, his hello practiced and kind. He moved steadily from one question to the next. How was she eating? Sleeping? Any unusual headaches? His stethoscope rested against her chest, then her back. A flashlight sweep of her throat and ears. Each touch, each gesture, unfolded like all the others before. From the mother's chair in the corner, it all looked safe. A checkup, just like every year. The kind that ends with a lollipop from the jar near the desk. But even in the stillness of that routine, something subtle stirred. And as the next moments unfolded, the ordinary rhythm began to shift under their eyes. The doctor's questions carried on, steady and routine at first. He asked about her sleep, about breakfast, about whether she'd been tired lately. His stethoscope moved with practiced rhythm across her narrow back. Then, as he tilted her chin upward to inspect her throat, his hand stalled. Just long enough for the mother to notice. A breath, a pause, and the faint crease of his brow. She shifted slightly in her chair. The expression wasn't dramatic, but it was different, like a dip in the tone of a familiar song. One part of her wanted to brush it off. Another part couldn't. She studied her daughter's cheeks, the freckles she adored, and now the faint paleness beneath them. Until that moment, she had called it winter skin, but as the silence stretched, she wasn't so sure. The doctor cleared his throat and asked again about fatigue. This time, his words were careful, angled. Does she ever seem worn out after school? Need to lie down more than other kids her age? He scribbled in the margins of the chart, the tip of his pen tapping softly in between his notes. Then his eyes flicked back to the growth curve he had already explained only minutes before. At the edge of the table, the girl had tuned out their exchange. Her crayon looped wide purple swirls across the exam paper, filling the corner with bursts of color. She hummed faintly, content inside her picture, while the air around her tightened. The mother pressed her thumb against her palm, a grounding habit she rarely noticed. One stray thought surfaced. Something had shifted, though she couldn't yet name what. If this quiet moment feels familiar, leave a comment. Others will see they're not alone. The doctor set the pen down, his tone no longer casual. He recommended a routine blood test, the kind usually scheduled weeks later. But this time, he added, it should happen now, before they left the building. His voice was gentle, but each word held a firmer weight. And so, before they could go home, or even close the file, the next step came. A brief walk down the hall toward the place where questions start to reach for answers. The phlebotomist worked swiftly, her calm voice guiding each step. The needle went in, The tube filled, and before long a bright bandage covered the tiny mark on the girl's arm. She praised her for sitting so still, calling her brave. Then they were ushered back to the exam room with a promise. Results would be back in 20 minutes. The clock picked up the rhythm from there. Each tick landed sharper against the quiet, a steady reminder in the corner of the room. The girl leaned into her mother, a tablet game glowing between her hands for a time, then slipping to stillness when her energy waned. With her head resting against her mother's side, her movements slowed until even the screen no longer held her attention. Her cheeks, once warm with chatter, looked different now. A softness had drained from them. The mother brushed a thumb over her daughter's hair, smoothing the wisps behind her ear in a small, steadying motion. She told herself it was just the weight, the lull after the poke of a needle. Yet as she studied her daughter's face, a faint grayness settled in her awareness, something she hadn't noticed before. Her own chest rose heavier, matching the quiet unease that the clock kept marking out. Minutes passed with little sound, but the tick on the wall and the girl's shallow breath. The mother counted a few of them, pressed her lips together, then let the numbers go. Waiting was all they could do now. And still, each moment seemed to grow larger around them. When the door opened, it was without ceremony, just a gentle turn of the knob. The doctor stepped in with a single sheet of paper, held flat in both hands. He didn't shuffle it or glance casually through a chart. His posture told its own story, leaving no space for small talk. He stood for a moment longer than expected, his eyes moving not to the mother first, but to the child at her side. Then he placed the paper on the counter, his finger pausing at the top line. The room tightened again, and the waiting gave way to what those numbers carried. The doctor placed the paper flat on the counter, his finger resting calmly on two numbers near the top. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he tapped the page lightly with his pen, then circled the lines in a slow, deliberate motion. When he did explain, his words were careful and plain. He said the first number was like a fuel gauge, meant to show how well the body keeps itself running. In her case, it was sliding far too low, like a car nearly out of gas even though it still rolled down the road. The second number, he said, showed a system straining, like workers pushing long past their shift to keep things going. Together, they spelled unusual stress in a child who should have looked strong and steady. The mother tried to connect these comparisons to the little girl sitting only feet away. Her daughter had tipped sideways against the table, eyelids heavy, breathing soft and even. In that moment, she looked serene, almost like she might fall asleep in the comfortable stillness of the room. Nothing about her posture shouted danger, yet on the page, the loops the doctor had drawn told another story entirely. She found herself staring back and forth, the numbers in dark ink, the quiet child resting her cheek against her arms. The sharp contrast between the two felt impossible to bridge. Everything her eyes told her fought against what the paper claimed. But she could see the weight in the doctor's expression. He wasn't guessing. Something was real here, even if invisible to her. He paused just long enough to meet her gaze. His voice did not rise in alarm, but every syllable carried purpose. He admitted results like these were not what he expected from an ordinary appointment, and in a child who still looked outwardly well, they raised the most serious concerns. Her hand settled protectively over her daughter's back, as if to anchor them both. She could feel the shift happening. This was no longer about a yearly checkup. It was about what the doctor would choose to do next, and whether there was time left to wait at all. His choice was steady. Conversation was over. Every instinct told him that waiting could let something unseen collapse without warning. He weighed at once, briefly, the commotion an ambulance might cause against the risk of stillness. Clarity came quickly. Appearances were fragile. He would act. The mother caught the shift. Confusion on her face gave way to a sharper recognition, the slow thread of connection between numbers on a page and the faint pallor in her child's skin. She saw the weariness she had brushed aside now framed in a harsher light. That was confirmation enough. The doctor would not call a colleague for discussion. He would move forward with the clinic's emergency protocol. His hand reached toward the phone mounted on the wall. The motion carried no panic, but no hesitation either. He lifted the receiver in one smooth step. The room held still, except for the low hum of fluorescent light and the soft sound of paper crackling as the child shifted. Children learn to read energy without words. She sensed it at once. Her eyes lifted from the drawing she had been tracing on the exam table. She saw the focus in the doctor's face, the protective tension in her mother's. Around her, the air felt heavier, even if she couldn't explain why. The mother wrapped her arms around her daughter, drawing her closer. Without thinking, she became a shelter. The dial tone rose into the room, a single, steady sound that suddenly carried too much meaning. It felt loud, out of place, stripping away any comfort left in the silence. Then, one number. Then the second, then the third. 3 digits, simple and ordinary on their own, but together they crossed a line. The quiet of a checkup was gone. In its place, the start of a direct call for help. The doctor steadied the receiver against his ear, posture upright, breath even. His voice was ready, clear and contained. What came next was the moment that would carry their need beyond the small exam room and into someone else's hands. His voice remained steady on the line. He gave his name, his role, and the location of the clinic down to the suite number. Then he stated the nature of the call as plainly as possible. This was a pediatric emergency. The dispatcher's voice came through clear and calm, a practiced rhythm that never wavered. She asked sharply defined questions. Was the child awake? Was she breathing on her own? Was she still answering? Each response from the doctor was immediate. He kept one hand on the phone, the other resting lightly at the girl's wrist, feeling the pulse that told him enough for now. When medical terms might have confused, he translated them. The numbers on the page showed a serious imbalance, something that could worsen rapidly if it wasn't addressed. Out loud, he added what mattered most. She appeared stable, but stability could change in an instant. It was the kind of danger that hides until it doesn't. From her chair, the mother could hear only his side of this exchange. Phrases like risk of sudden change and urgent monitoring landed heavily in the space between them. She filled the silence from the dispatcher's end with her own quiet dread, imagining what details she couldn't hear. Every clipped answer from the doctor carried another weight her mind rushed to picture, and fear. All the while, small movements continued in the room. The child stirred, turned her head, and mumbled something soft before fading again into stillness. The doctor's eyes followed that rise and fall of her chest. He spoke to the dispatcher, but his attention never drifted from the fragile steadiness before him. Near the close of the call, his tone shifted back to logistics. He gave precise directions: how to reach the building, which hallway to take, where to find the exam room door. His voice outlined a clear path in, while his hand pressed lightly at the girl's wrist, anchoring them both. The call wrapped quickly. The dispatcher offered final words, simple and vital. Units were already en route. Then the line went silent, leaving behind the weight of what had been said and the promise that very soon, help would enter the room. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their presence shifting the quiet exam room into a space of swift, purposeful movement. One carried a compact pediatric kit, another a folded gurney, and a third followed with cases of supplies. The clutter of zippers and Velcro signaled readiness, not disruption. What had been a calm waiting space was now filled with quiet efficiency. The doctor stepped forward, his summary crisp and direct. Key details traded hands in clipped sentences while he watched the child, his attention steady and fixed. Then he stepped back, ceding space as the team closed in around the girl. The mother held her daughter close, her arms wrapped as if to preserve a world that was suddenly crowded with strangers. The girl's eyes blinked open, puzzled by the new faces and the steady rustle of gear. A paramedic with gentle eyes dropped low until she was at the child's level. Her tone was soft, almost conversational. "Hey there. My name is Jen. We're just going to check a couple of things. Your mom's right here." She eased a small sensor over the child's finger. "See? Like a little glow light." The cuff hugging her arm was explained as just that, a hug, and the words softened the sting of unfamiliar motions. The team moved with practiced smoothness, narrating each step, as much for the mother as for the girl. Monitors chirped quietly in response to their checks, and the numbers traded between them were simple, coded cues that kept the room grounded. Every movement was precise, gentle yet assured. When it was time, they lifted the girl carefully onto the gurney. Straps buckled with calm firmness, the kind that spoke of both safety and speed. A blanket was laid over her, tucked gently to ward off the chill of the transition. The mother stayed close, a hand on her daughter's leg, refusing to let the small connection slip. The gurney moved smoothly into the hall. The steady push carried them past doors, through the corridor, and toward the waiting elevator. What began in a quiet exam room was now moving toward a different kind of space, one already braced and ready to receive them. In the hospital, a new team was waiting. They had been briefed on the way in. The essentials passed through from the clinic before the ambulance doors even opened. The transition was smooth. Her small frame lifted onto a hospital bed, wires clipped gently onto her chest, soft beeps starting their steady rhythm. An IV was threaded into her arm with practiced care, clear fluid dripping through the line. Hours stretched as numbers on the monitors began to shift. Slowly, the measured signs that had been troubling edged back toward steadier ground. The mother sat, anchored at her daughter's side. She refused to leave the room, refused even to move far from reach. At night, she folded herself into the thin chair that clicked into a cot, keeping one hand resting lightly on her child's foot below the blanket. Each beep from the machine became familiar, almost soothing, a code she was learning to read. Specialists came, reviewed the findings, and spoke carefully. They said her body had been carrying a metabolic issue that had likely gone unnoticed for some time. It wasn't something anyone could have seen coming. What mattered now was that it could be managed. They outlined a careful plan: ongoing monitoring, regular tests, and clear follow-up with a new care team. The news settled not as an ending, but as a workable beginning. A path forward existed. Day by day, color began returning to the girl's face. First, it was small sparks, asking for her stuffed animal, smiling briefly at a cartoon flickering above her bed. Soon she was sitting upright, crayon in hand again, filling paper with color as though nothing had been paused. Those tiny shifts carried more weight than the machines or the test sheets ever could. On the second day, the clinic doctor appeared in the doorway. He didn't step far into the room. He just watched for a moment as she colored, cheeks brighter. Then he met the mother's eyes and nodded solemnly before slipping away. That one quiet gesture carried relief, gratitude, and the grounded truth of what they had all witnessed together. Their story in that hospital was not only about treatment. It became about trust, between professionals, between strangers, between a parent and the smallest signals her child gave. And in those exchanges, you find what always sits beneath moments like this: the balance of fear and hope held side by side. What this story leaves us with is simple. In moments that turn suddenly urgent, it's the steady presence of care, professional hands, and a parent's watch that makes the difference. If you've had a routine visit turn urgent, share that moment below. Your story might help someone feel less alone. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.